NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh is proposing several new initiatives to address Canada's student housing crisis. He joins us live with more on his plan. Thanks for joining us in studio. So let's talk about this new initiative. What are you suggesting?
So a couple of things. First of all, we've got a really serious housing crisis across the board. So there's no question about it. On top of that, students are particularly hard hit. So I spoke with a number of students that are commuting multi-hours to get to school because they can't afford to rent in Toronto. And Toronto is one of the most expensive cities in Canada to rent. So there has to be dedicated student housing that's separate from the regular housing stream. So what we're proposing, two major things. One is we need to have a federal framework where the federal government contributes 1/3, the province does 1/3, and the institution, so the university or college does 1/3, to build dedicated student housing. That's one really important tool. The second one is there's lots of office buildings that are now vacant because people are working from home more often. So those vacant office buildings, we can incentivize businesses, not-for-profit community organizations, and schools, the institutions, to collaborate to convert them into student dormitories. There's a lot of solutions out there, but we've got to get really aggressive about incentivizing and pushing for housing to be built, but specifically student housing as well.
It seems that there is such a strong desire for these more creative solutions to increase housing and affordable housing in the city. Have you had any conversations with the Liberal government and also the province here and also City Hall? What's been the reaction?
The new mayor is very open to this idea of doing everything possible to build more housing, so there's no question there. What we've seen from the federal level, whether it's been the 9 years of Conservatives with Harper and Pierre Poilievre was a key cabinet minister, or the past 8 years of Justin Trudeau, they've not really taken student housing seriously. They've not made those investments. And we've spoken to businesses that are ready to do the work, but there needs to be incentives because of the current climate with high interest rates. A lot of projects have been canceled. So we need to see government initiatives to incentivize and support these projects, or they're not going to happen.
Not only does Toronto have a severe problem with getting things built and getting things built in a timely manner, they also have issues and a lot of red tape when it comes to rezoning. And you're talking about taking some of these vacant office buildings, and vacancies are quite high, especially in post-pandemic era. How do you plan to try and convince municipalities like Toronto to try and, let's take another look at how we rezone it and make it and expedite the process so we can get cheaper housing for students?
Well, unlike Pierre Poilievre, who wants to blame municipalities, I think we only can get good results if we work together. Justin Trudeau has been trying to say it's not his job. Pierre Poilievre is trying to blame municipalities. I know this can be done if we create the right incentives and if we work together. A lot of mayors actually want to see development. They want to push for it. A lot of city councils want to see development. What we need to do is have a federal partner that's willing to put up some of the incentives to make this happen, and that's what we're pushing for.
We know that about 500,000 newcomers are expected to come to the country over the next little while, and that's not including the hundreds of thousands of students that come from overseas. And I'm wondering, what are your, short-term and long-term concerns about the fact that we might not be able to attract some of that, quality talent that wants to come to Canada to get educated and then potentially find a job here, live here, and contribute to our society? What's some of your short-term and long-term concerns about that?
Yeah, we can't attract them if there's nowhere for them to live. So that's a big concern. And so on the student side, international students face a lot of challenges, high tuition fees. We need the immigration, but there's a lot of challenges because there's nowhere for them to live. So we're proposing an idea where institutions, so colleges and universities, would be given study permits based on having a plan that's viable for affordable housing for the students that they're bringing in. So that's one solution. In addition, what we need to do is we need to build more homes very rapidly. But we have to build homes that people can actually afford. And that's a big concern. I spoke with a young man today who is an IBEW union worker, good job. He left his community in Toronto in the GTA and has now bought a house in Thunder Bay. But he says, it's a home, or it's a house, but it's not a home because I miss my family, my friends behind. He wanted to stay here but couldn't afford to. So we've got to build homes that are actually affordable for people. That's a big concern.
Let's talk about another crisis that's happening right now up in the Northwest Territories, and I know that you were recently there. Talk about a little about what you saw and what is some of the. Are you satisfied with what's being done to assist those individuals?
So I was in Yellowknife, the capital, and I also went to Hay River. And Hay River is probably the worst example of extreme weather. They had extreme flooding, extreme forest fires, and extreme drought, all within a period of about a year and a half. So too much water, way too little water, forest fires, floods, all in a short period of time. When I was in Yellowknife was receiving evacuees from neighboring communities that were being threatened by forest fires, and now Yellowknife is having to evacuate. Taking that in for a moment, it is mind-boggling that the community that was receiving evacuees is now having to be evacuated. So we're calling on the federal government to step up with supports to make sure that people are getting the assistance to get out of their communities that they're being threatened. But this really highlights how serious the climate crisis is.
We're living through unprecedented times. I don't think you and I have ever, seen such devastation right across the country, whether it's BC, whether we're talking Alberta, here in Ontario, Northern Ontario, Quebec. There's wildfires right across the country.
Nova Scotia.
And Nova Scotia, obviously. How does this, reinforce the urge to tackle the climate crisis?
I think it's become really real. I think people for a long time knew there's a problem. You could tell that if we're polluting, there's always going to be some consequence. But it's become really in our face. When you're seeing smog days in Toronto that we haven't seen since the coal-fired plants, and since they were gone, that's not something that people thought about in Toronto. And now we're seeing them again. I remember I was a young lawyer, and I would remember seeing those smog days, and they were gone, but now it's coming back. In Ottawa, when Parliament was sitting, there were just intense, hazy days where you could breathe in the smoke in the air. That's something that we've not seen before. And I hope that that's really going to motivate us to take it seriously and do something about it.
Do you think this will incentivize more climate policies moving forward?
I hope so. I wish it didn't take seeing the devastation so up close and so in our face, but with the forest fires ravaging across the country, we're seeing communities that were never impacted before, like Halifax in Atlantic. Halifax is a community, it's pretty rainy normally. You would never think of it as a place that would be subject to a forest fire, but the forest fires hit some of the suburbs of Halifax. So this is quite serious, and it really highlights how we need to act.
NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh, thanks for stopping by, talking about these important issues. Appreciate it.